Hello, everybody. My name is BJ, and this is my friend Matt. He's a globetrotting genealogist and linguist. And today we're going to be talking about, well, it's the first of a series called From the Archives. We've got all these records out of Africa that we're working on sharing with the world right now. We have a project called MBUYU, and our website is MBUYU.org. That's MBYU. No, MBUYU.org. And yeah, MBUYU. And that's where we're going to be making it so that records throughout Africa become available to everyone. We're starting in Burundi, and we have some stories that we found while we're creating all these digital archives that are going to be publicly available. And Matt, you've prepared one for us today, or two of them, it sounds like.
Yes, I have two. But first, I want to say hi. Yes, I am Matt. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, BJ, calling me and starting this series. What happens is that if your ancestors, I'm going to try to put this in gentle terms. If your ancestors are European or of that sort of person, then you have everything available to you. You have land records, court records, civil records, church records, burials, military, immigration, all sorts of things. If your ancestors are not of those peoples, you're not so blessed. And the perception is that records just aren't available, let's say for South Asia and for Africa. And I want to just state up front, that's not true. They just haven't been collected. Well, now I'm not going to be so delicate. I want to get to the point. The white people started collecting their ancestors' records around about 1840. That's when the first genealogical societies were formed, and they've been at it then for about 180 years. The Africans have not. I guess that's just about all you can say for it. But there are two things that I want to surprise the viewers with. First, that a great many things that those Europeans are looking for can be found in the archives of Africa. Okay, so whatever happened to great-great-uncle so-and-so, the answer is found in these African records. And the rest, what about the ancestry of the Africans themselves? It's never been looked at, and we're just beginning to change it. MBUYU.org is beginning in the little country of Burundi to help them digitize their national resources. So now back to the story you mentioned. I have, as an example of what can be found, a fun story out of it's a law report on a case in the island nation of Zanzibar, which then was under an Omani sultan. The British had entered to administer Zanzibar at the Omani's request. And so they came in
the
fully.
Sultan asked the British to like govern in a sense?
Yes, it's the same thing that the Turks were doing in the Eastern Mediterranean at the time. They said, you British have a mighty navy. We are surrounded by water. We are having trouble administering our it was government for hire.
Okay.
Yeah. And they said, if you British will come in and administer, if you'll come in and be the bureaucracy, all we require is that you gather taxes and send them to us, keeping whatever operating costs you need.
Wow. So it's a plug and play government, like you said.
It's a plug and play. The British were imperialists deluxe anyway. It just ended up, I don't want to say they were sneaky about it, but it ended up that they were able in almost every case to overcome the people who hired them and take over.
I don't know what's not sneaky about that, but okay.
It took years. I don't know that that was their original intent, but that's how it happened.
All right.
So in Zanzibar, or in every case that they came in, whether it was the British or the Belgians or the French, they came in with a full bureaucracy. We are going to administer this thing. If they want plug and play bureaucracy, we're going to give them bureaucracy. And they had a full court system. They named justices. They had clerks of the court, all of them European, in every case, for at least several decades. And they administered, here's where it got funky. They administered the law that needed to be administered in the case before them at the moment.
So, okay, but when I think of British jurisprudence, I think of, Roman common law, which means that, I base all my decisions on previous cases that were tried.
And that was the case for them, but their body of law was mostly not from England. It was from their experience in India for several centuries.
Okay.
Because much of the casework that they were handling in Zanzibar and in other parts of Africa was of a British India populace. And when necessary, if it was two Brits, then they would apply a law that they took from England. If it was mixed, they consulted with their advisors on which law applies.
Huh.
Which is why, and we didn't discuss this in advance. I've got another story that you asked me to tell, but there was a case out of Cyprus where the British were invited to administer by the Ottoman Empire.
Okay.
And a Christian man went to court to get his wife back. She had run away with a Muslim man. And the British judge ruled in favor of the woman because he was administering Ottoman Sharia law.
Okay, all right.
Which says that when she left you and renounced you and took up with a Muslim man, she became his wife. So you cannot sue to have your wife returned because you don't have one.
All right.
That, again, a British judge.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. Okay. So when you're talking about...
All right.
Okay,
now we're going to get to the story that you want to hear.
Right,
and it's much simpler. It's just common civil law. The defendant was the owner of a bull. And this is from October of 1876 in Zanzibar. And I've got to tell you, I've visited Zanzibar and the streets are narrow. Keep that in mind. The defendant was the owner of a bull. One evening, sometime before the action, the bull came along a street in the bazaar and stopped at the plaintiff's stall. It was in evidence that the bull was unattended, and further, that it was so savage that nobody could be got to take charge of it. There's just so much outside of this that you can imagine. The bull took up a piece of jackfruit rind outside the plaintiff's stall. The plaintiff waved his arms to scare it away and cried, "Shoo!" The bull charged the plaintiff and inflicted serious injuries. It was denied by several witnesses that the plaintiff had a stick. And I'll explain that in a second, why that matters. There was a good deal of evidence admitted to prove the bull's reputation for savageness. Again, so the man who got injured has called witnesses into court.
All these different people have been gored by this bull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One witness deposed that the bull sometime lay down in the street, which thereupon was practically closed for all traffic. And that upon one such occasion, the witness went home a long way around.
Yeah, so the whole alleyway is just empty.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to mess with this
Nobody
bull.
wants to mess with this bull. This bull is well known. The defendant admitted that the bull had broken loose from his stall 4 times, but denied that he had attacked anyone or would without provocation. So the defendant's case was he must have waved a stick at it and he deserved what he got. Because my bull, all right, so he likes to roam around, but he's not going to hurt anybody.
So everybody else says this guy's bull is a problem.
Yeah,
this guy's like, no.
The court concludes it being evident that the defendant had every opportunity of knowing that his bull was a dangerous animal, and further that at any rate he did know that the temper of the animal was such that it was desirable to keep it tied up,
At the very
and that
least.
he has neglected properly to secure it on former occasions, and afterwards when it had escaped for the 4th time and a dhow owner, a boat owner, had declined to ship it in his vessel, He neglected further to keep or restrain it from going wherever it liked, thus causing annoyance or damage to many, culminating in the infliction by this animal of dreadful injuries, and those for life of the plaintiff. Judgment for the plaintiff, damages $188, equal to 400 rupees, with costs of the court in addition. This amount will be handed to His Majesty's Consul General with a request that he will apply it on behalf of the plaintiff as he thinks best for his interest. Now, there's several things going on here. First off, it's just beautiful language. It's steep British jurisprudence. The case was between Mago, who is described only, that's his only name, as a Mnyamwezi, which was a coastal tribe of the Tanganyika territory, and Jaitha Hurida, which appears to be an Indian name, and who was the stall owner. Wait a minute.
The jackfruit vendor?
Mago, the Mnyamwezi, versus Jaitha Hurida. Jaitha Hurida must be the owner of the animal.
Oh, okay.
And Mago was the store owner.
Because you say the person bringing the complaint first.
Right. Yeah. It's a multicultural case. It's downtown Zanzibar one evening.
Yeah, main shipping lane.
Yeah,
plenty going on out there.
1876.
Yeah.
Somebody's got a jackfruit rind sitting outside. By the way, if you don't know jackfruit, don't stand under the tree when they're ripe. They're
big,
about the size of watermelons.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know they grew on a tree. That's wild.
All right. So I brought you that example just to let you know that even in 1876, we've got a description of a couple of people who are not British before a British magistrate using British purist jurisprudence to solve the matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to share my screen to show you something else that I've got. He navigates to it. This is a similar thing. It's an extract of a court record. It's all in French. It's from the official bulletin of the Belgian administration of Rwanda, Burundi, 1938.
Well, now the Belgians, they weren't hired in as administrators the way that the British
what
were.
happened?
They were conquerors, right?
Conqueror is too strong a word.
Okay.
They were assumers.
I'll
explain real quick.
Okay.
Everybody, between the time that Henry Morton Stanley crossed Africa in the mid 1870s until the First World War, there was a scramble on to chop up Africa. Every European country saw it as the new frontier and hurried to take their piece of it. The British were already in South Africa, and further up on the east side, they were in Kenya. And they got this idea that they would love to go the full length. They wanted all of East Africa, but the Germans were already holding a big chunk that they called the Tanganyika territory after the big lake on the other side of it, Lake Tanganyika.
Okay.
The Germans then got caught on the losing side of World War I. And meanwhile, the Belgians who were in the Congo to the west were pushing their interests. And when the Germans lost power, the victors, who were everybody else, the Belgians and the British and the French, they all saw that they could just move in and take over German territories.
And they were all suffering for money because they just had to fight a world war.
Right. So the British, being the closest to Tanganyika, moved into there, but the Belgians, being the closest to Rwanda and Burundi, moved into there.
Okay.
And then there were conferences in Europe saying, boys, let's not fight. There's plenty for everybody. Belgium can keep Rwanda and Burundi, and the British can keep Tanganyika. And so you have in the 1930s, actually between World War I and independence, which was pretty much always right around 1960, every one of these colonial powers was being, just like in Zanzibar in 1876, fully Europeanly bureaucratic.
Okay.
So we have here, now we're back, that's the background.
Yeah, I appreciate the context because I'm
Yeah,
a
no,
little
we
clueless,
have
probably just an
here,
average
you'll see
American.
the name up early, a name Pierre Lowe.
Uh-huh.
He is a man designated by the judge to hear out this trial. And then you'll see the name of Kasore, the son of Kiburwa, who is deceased, and of Ntwa Jirira, who is living. He is a Murundi, which is the singular for a person from Burundi.
Oh.
He is an Umuhutu, which is the singular for a Hutu. And you may have heard historically of the Hutus and the Tutsis.
Yeah.
And then it just says he is summoned to appear in court seated at Kibago in the territory of Bururi in the administrative area of Burundi, which is also known as Burundi.
Okay.
But the reason that he's being brought in is he's the local chief. When the colonial powers took over, instead of turning everything on its ear, throwing everybody out, they thought we already have people in positions of authority. They're called chiefs. Let's just call them local administrators.
Okay.
And they did that with this guy, Kasore, who has no Christian name. His father is deceased. What I want to point out now, the value genealogically is that Kasore, being a chief, was probably at least 40 years old. This record being in 1938, Kasore was born before 1900. And it names his father, who is deceased, and his mother, who is living, both of them by single names. And these are names that you won't find probably in any other record at all. Okay, so this is the beginning of true African genealogy, earlier than any other record, naming a generation that is not named anywhere else.
Wow.
But this court case is more fun because it is a number of people under the authority of this chief bringing him to court for extortion.
Wait, who tried the case? The chief is on trial, you're saying?
The chief is on trial because he is, by this time, still being called a chief, but he is, in essence, a county official.
Sure. Okay.
What would you call it?
Well, you said administrator earlier. I think that's, generic enough.
Right.
He's a bureaucrat who has control over some money and has some power to affect whatever his office is.
Yes. And when you are a chief, you can do whatever you want, but when you're a regional administrator or local administrator,
you're accountable to someone.
You're accountable to the authorities, and
Right.
There is a chart on your wall that says, for a marriage, this much, for decision in a civil matter, this much, fees.
Okay.
But this guy is brought to court by Birohera, Kitanga, Ntuye, Manyeye, and multiple others because he extracted more than he ought to have.
So he's taking bribes on top of fees, or just like lying about the fees?
He was not taking bribes. He was saying, from you, I'll take a cow. So the first guy, he said, I had to pay 2 cows, 2 milk cows and a bullock. The next one, a milk cow and a bullock. It gets down to where it's kind of fun. A heifer and 50 francs, 5 pots of beer. But now I'm going to come out of this sharing thing because we've looked at it.
Oh, well, I wasn't seeing your screen. Were you sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe I just wasn't seeing it. That's fine.
Well, all right. And then if not, let me go back.
Yeah, it'd be fun to just have a peek at. I can't read French anyway.
Well, now I see I should have hit the share button.
There you go. All of our Francophone viewers can go ahead and read through this.
Yeah, this is it. In the year 1938, the first day of the month of October, and so on. This is the extract, a summary of a court case, and it just tells how he, month after month, year after year, extorted from the people of his administrative area. Yeah. He acted like a chief instead of a district administrator, and the people, Burundians, recognized that they could avail themselves of Belgian jurisprudence to get rid of a bad chief.
That's fantastic.
It is
Well, because I
fantastic.
mean, alternatively, you could kill him, or you could cut his hands off and make a mockery of him or something. I mean, like, your options are limited, but in this case, you just take him to court. Tell him he's a bad guy. He needs to knock it off.
All right, BJ, you
Only.
stepped into a trap.
Oh, really?
Yes, because these chiefs, when the Belgians took over from the Germans, and the Germans themselves took over just by arriving,
Okay.
they respected, because it was easier, the authority of the king. The king appointed the chiefs, who appointed the sub-chiefs.
Okay.
So the chief in question, this guy Kasori, was serving at the pleasure of a king who was allowed to stay in office by the colonial authorities because it was easier than fighting everybody to the death. So I see you looking. So what does that mean? That means that the people of the village kicked out an authority appointed by the king using Belgian jurisprudence.
Okay.
How he got replaced, I can't even begin to imagine, except the Belgians saying king. It ends up that the guy out there in Burundi was a knothead, and he has fled.
Give us a better one this time.
Give us a better one. Yeah, let me stop sharing then.
Thank you.
Okay,
That
so
was cool to see.
Imagine then if we could digitize and index all of the official bulletin,
Yeah.
and all of the other available records of the era. You would find a whole new appreciation of what was going on. Just like that single case of the people throwing out a chief.
Right.
Using the courts.
Right. Who is holding up all, everyone's social life by saying who can get married and how much it's going to cost. Who's holding up everybody's business life by saying you're not only going to be allowed to use this road if, or whatever. All these different arbitrary rules that one person can throw out to enrich himself at the expense of others.
Yeah, right. Then now you've got to just see something else. It'll just take a moment. Let us go to.
I don't know if you can hear drums beating in the background, but my son's practicing the drums, so you'll just have to forgive that.
If this doesn't work, and it's not going to work, we'll go back to our Zoom meeting. Forget that. I'm not going to share the screen. What I was going to show you is several sites that I thought I had open, where different organizations, usually with grant money from one European government or another, have digitized as many gazettes, these official newsletters of the governments, as they can. They have all of them online for Kenya since 1906.
Awesome.
They have tens of thousands of these gazettes online. I've been recently reading the 1870 Gazette of the Cape Colony at Cape Town, South Africa.
Okay. But they'd had gazettes for a while already by the 1870s in Cape Town, right?
From the very first year that these colonial powers come in, they felt it necessary to begin publishing a monthly or biweekly report of the actions of the government.
Do you feel like they're pretty biased? Like, if I read reports from the government, they seem to basically pump themselves up. I mean, even today, I'm not talking about, King George III's defense of King George III was pretty self-righteous. You know what I mean?
All right, wait. I might disappear from the screen here for a second because you have also just stepped into something. Dang it.
I think we have an endless tangent here.
All right, you want an answer.
Sure.
I'm famous for not getting to the answer. I feel like there's a lot of background necessary. Any government is going to say, here is what this government is doing, and here is what its positive effects are.
Right.
However, in the 1870 Gazette of the Cape Colony, the governor gave a speech to open Parliament. And he basically said, you all are murmuring about being under an imperial government. And I have to admit that there is a collision course between a locally a local government responsible to its constituents,
Mhm.
needing to be responsive also to an uber government of the empire.
Yeah.
And he says this collision course has already led to a prospering new nation on North America, and will probably do the same thing in Australia. And here in South Africa, probably the same thing, but it will mean chopping this place up into several countries, probably. So you asked, is it just praising the government and downplaying the locals? No.
Yeah, that's a pretty clear admission. Be like, this never works out just to one person's advantage.
And another thing that, again, I was just looking at today, in that 1870 Gazette, they have notices of destitute children. Somebody brings a ward of the state, a local magistrate brings in a boy, say 6 years old, and says, some folks brought me to him because his dad's in jail and his mom just died. And we don't have an orphanage. So I'm holding on to him for 6 weeks, according to law. And at the end of 6 weeks, whoever can say, I will provide room and board, can have him. He will be, if he's older, he'll be indentured or apprenticed. If he's younger, it's just whoever says they'll care for him. Whether that boy was, and I'm using terms from the time, I'm not trying to be racist, whether he's colored, which usually meant mixed Indian, or if he's Hottentot, or if he's, and they name one of the tribes, or if he's European, which means his parents were actually from Europe, or if he's white, which means his parents are from South Africa, but not African, they treated them the same, at least in print.
Right.
But let me step back out to the macro. What we're describing is a large body of documentary evidence that hasn't really been looked at.
Right. So you showed me some pictures of the state of records in Burundi right now, which is where the MBUYU project is starting out. So MBUYU.org, I think, even has some of the photos on there right now. I mean, it'll probably change in the future, but of just kind of, you know, folders with papers inside sitting on shelves, which is fine, but it's not very modern. It's kind of a 1960s situation. And the MBUYU project is going to digitize them, scan them where possible, and make them searchable on the internet, just like those Kenyan documents you were talking about, just like, I mean, American documents that we get a Freedom of Information Act publication and everybody can go read it.
But one step better, because these gazettes that these wonderful organizations have digitized as images and put online aren't searchable by text.
Right. Yeah, you're gonna. So I mean, when I say scan them, I mean you're gonna OCR them too.
If you're a researcher, say at a university in Europe, and what you're interested in is the development of the railways in the Tanganyika territory, and you want to search for the term railway, you can't.
Yeah.
You instead have to get your hands on a digital version of the Territorial Gazette, and
which may or may not have an abstract.
And you go page by page, and there's about 500 to 800 pages per year. So you
just gotta trust your eyeballs to find the word.
You go through 100,000 pages to find any mention of railway.
Yeah.
Or someone like us digitizes it and scans it by OCR so that the full text is searchable.
Yeah.
And that's what we're after. And it not only will create this new ability to research the area, but for the people of the area, it will create the ability to look for their family in a way that they never could before. In a civil vein, I'm going to tout all of these all at once. I didn't know I would do that in this first one, but
that's fine.
In a civil vein, you and I have talked about this off camera. In Burundi, now someone comes in and says, I was involved in a court case. I won a court case last year and the guy was ordered to pay me. Only now he's not paying me. Can I please get a copy of that court case so that I can show it to him? And they say, I'm sorry, but we're unable to find that. Because all the court cases from last year were stacked up, put in a box and put into the back room, and we're not even sure which box they're in.
Mm.
Everything, a school record or forget it. I won't go on. I will just say this project will create the sort of responsiveness of government that we expect.
Yeah, I mean, from what you just said, continuity from one year to the next isn't even reliable. And so many of my expectations are wrapped up in that. If I want to prove that I've been authorized to do something, like usually I have a copy in hand and I can go look one up on a website. Or if I want to, just show a private actor my if I need to borrow money from a bank or something, then I can.
Or let's say you want to show that you do indeed own the land you live on.
Yeah.
Where's the deed?
Right. I can ask any title search company for that information and they'll go find it for me because they can.
Right. And in this case, you're going to go to the land registry office and ask for a copy, and they're going to say, we don't have that. But BJ, you are actually not going to go to the land registry office and ask for a copy because you know that the transaction was never registered, because why bother?
Right. So
you have a piece of paper that some guy wrote to you saying, I own this land and I just sold it to BJ.
Yeah.
And now somebody is coming claiming, well, the guy that sold it to you didn't have the right to sell it. And you want to go and find the records that show that it's legitimate and that you do own it. And there's no such record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've got, whoa. Okay, some of the people over there who are doing this. I forgot the name because it's a little hard for me to remember. There's a team of documentarians and records experts over there. And they're Burundians mostly, or all of them?
All of them.
They're all Burundians and they're over there. And they're the ones who actually get like the wage dollars that come out of this. Not all of the MBUYU project goes to wage dollars because obviously you have to buy equipment, for example. Right. I heard we were trying to buy a flattening scanner and some things like that.
Yes.
And
they are doing the best they can with limited resources and occasional power outages.
Right.
But when I was in Burundi last summer, and interested as I am in finding out what records are available to the Burundian people, and finding out that none were available, but many exist, I also contacted a man, his name is Jean Bosco Ntungirimana, who is the most active member of a group called the Burundian Association of Archivists, Librarians, and Documentarists.
That's it. That's the name.
It goes by Abad Bu in French.
Okay.
He is well known throughout the country as someone who gives seminars on records keeping and has over the years published articles, like you mentioned, showing the sorry state of things. And I don't want to say everything in one gulp here, but 10 years ago, he said, if we don't do something, we're in danger of losing our national collective memory.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed. The one good thing that hasn't changed is that John Bosco Ntungirimana still cares just the same. And he is now in charge of the digitizing effort. We, MBUYU.org, have empowered him to begin the digitizing. And the director of the National Archives of Burundi consented to it, as did his superiors, because I guess we're laying it all out on the table. We have offered to digitize and monetize their holdings.
Right. Yeah. So academics who want access to these old records that are in book format or in just loose paper format that were completely inaccessible unless you fly to Burundi and, you know, go there.
And risk going into their reading room.
If you can get permission.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. And being able to, you know, fund a group of people who are doing this important work and being able to make it so that Burundi can get paid for this work, you know, for the information. Just like any publisher should be, you know, compensated for the infrastructure that they put together. Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
If you're at the Center for African Studies in Liverpool, England, and you want to learn all about Burundi, do you want to spend the $5,000 to get the plane ticket and pay for the hotels and the taxis to go to and from an archive where you might not be able to find what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Or do you just want to jump online, use an institutional user's license that paid for by your university,
right,
and see all the images that you couldn't see even by going there,
right,
and use search terms to find what you're looking for
as quickly as we're able to scan them?
Exactly.
And input them. I'm sure there's a lot of typing that's happened too.
That's where we were. I want to summarize again. Many records are available.
Yeah.
Another juicy piece is that we expect the digital national archives of Burundi to be far bigger than the present national archives. And I'll explain. We expect that after digitizing their holdings, things on their shelves, we'll be able to ask the Ministry of Health and the Supreme Court and other ministries, what have you got in your back rooms and basements?
Yeah.
And we will digitize them and add them to the collection and add you to the distribution of the revenues of subscriptions. And we expect them all to say, yes, I definitely want in. And we believe that we will create a true national archive in a digital form.
Well, I mean, this is gonna change what it's like to do business in Burundi, what it's like to travel to Burundi, what it's like to grow up in Burundi, honestly.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be really valuable, being able to preserve their beautiful culture while the whole world is changing, you know, being able to sort of lock in the information that stands before, you know, everything gets too different than it is now is also going to be beautiful and valuable. Well,
now you said this was the first in a series. We'll talk more, and I'll give you just one small story at a time and won't do this to you again. But I do want the world to know about the wonderful things that they can learn out of these long forgotten records.
Well, thanks, Matt, for your story and for your time and for your wealth of knowledge. I'm really happy to be learning so much about this, and for my, you know, small piece of involvement in the MBUYU project. It's beautiful to see it happening. It's like actually happening right now, and that's a dream come true for Jean Bosco and plenty of other people.
Yeah.
And it's just maybe one of the coolest things I've ever had a piece of in my life is this awesome project. So anybody else who wants to be involved in any way, anybody else who's open to donating to make it so Burundi has a national digital archives, and so that these hardworking people in Abadbu, I hope I said that correctly, are, you know, continue to get paid and make this archive happen. It's all at MBUYU.org. So I think that's it for today.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
All right. Bye now.